Afternoon, everybody. We'll get started in just a minute. All right. Well, looks like still have a few people straggling in, but we'll go ahead and get started. You all know me at this point in the pandemic, so I won't reintroduce myself. Again, Troy's going to say a few words, but we really do want to give people a chance to ask questions. So please use the Q&A. You can ask questions anonymously if you would prefer that. As usual, use the thumb to upvote those questions that you're particularly interested in seeing us address. So with that, I'll turn things over to President Payno.
Well, thank you, Jeff. And before I get too far into this, I think we should all wish Dr. Jeff McClurkin a very happy birthday. So I could start singing, but I'm going to spare you that. I'm going to spare that. In all sincerity, happy birthday, Jeff. Thank you all for joining us. I don't think the faces on your screen need any introduction, but they are all here to answer any questions that you might have on any topic. If I can't answer it, I know that this very distinguished panel will be able to answer it for you. So look forward to taking your questions. Before we do that, I did want to just say a few words. It is great to look outside and see some of our students out on campus. I know if you're anything like me and come to campus, it has felt like a bit of a ghost town, but now as the weather is warming, I am seeing more and more students come out and enjoy our campus and be outside. So that is great. And only a little foretaste to what is to come in the months ahead, as we are really excited and looking forward to next fall. And I know there might be some questions about planning for next fall, and happy to answer those. But I'm happy to report, I believe, Nina, that roughly 90% of our classes are currently scheduled to be face-to-face classes in the fall. So that is, certainly a good sign of a return to normalcy. As I mentioned in my message last week, certainly there will be some protocols that will have to be followed, but it is our anticipation that those will be relatively modest compared to what we have had to endure the last year. So I am very optimistic as the vaccine continues to be distributed, that as we get later into the spring and summer, that our mood and our optimism will only grow in the coming weeks as we look forward to next fall. I will say also that just finishing the legislative session, even though it is not final until the governor signs, that we had a very successful legislative session, and it was certainly encouraging to see the legislature to give sort of an investment support, really a sign of support to Mary Washington this past session. I talked about some of the details of some of the things we got through this session in my email last week. Happy to take any specific questions that you might have as it relates to that. It's interesting, we all, as we have been working in isolation now, it was a year ago on Thursday, I believe March 11th, that we sent out the announcement that we were going to be transitioning to remote learning and sending our students home. It's been quite a year, and we're going to have an opportunity over the course of the coming days to really reflect on this past year and everything that we've endured. I think when we made that call, we could not have imagined what was ahead of us in the coming 12 months. I mentioned that in my email last week. It was hard to imagine because when we sent that message out, we had some hope that we might be able to return students and return to something that looked like normal before even the end of that semester. Little did we know that 12 months later, we would still be having to deal with the pandemic in the way we've had. And we've lost so much. And I know that there are probably some of you who have lost loved ones through this, or at least know people who have lost loved ones. Some of you have suffered directly as a result of the pandemic, if not from your health, certainly in other ways, and have had to sort of support not only yourself, but your families through this and the stress that you've had to endure. So certainly my heart goes out to each and every one of you. It's been interesting in talking to students recently. I've been getting more and more questions about what I'm doing. I think that there is some question about, as we work in isolation, exactly, some people wonder what a president does to begin with, but I think a lot of people are really wondering, what does a president do in the middle of a pandemic? And the students wanted me to send more messages about what it is I'm up to on a daily basis. So I'm considering how to do that. I couldn't imagine why people would want to know the ins and outs of my day. But if people do, I am happy to share what I've been up to on a daily basis. It certainly has been unusual, and some of the activities that a president does certainly have been disrupted. Kelly and I oftentimes talk about our evenings, usually, especially this time of year. It was a year ago, we were planning on a very busy spring, because spring is usually the time of year, and Lisa will certainly vouch for this, that we do a lot of external relations. This is when we do a lot of donor events, a lot of alumni events. We do a lot of end of the year events with students. We have students over at Brompton, or I'm coming to campus for special award events, ceremonies. A lot of things going on typically in March and April, especially in the evenings. So a very lively social calendar. It's not unusual in March and April for 4 or 5 nights a week that I have something scheduled and have something that I need to attend. And so certainly those evenings have opened up a bit, I will say, even though we have done some of these virtually over the course of the year, connecting with donors and alumni in that way. Certainly less so, and I miss them. I miss being connected and seeing people and seeing our students and interacting with our students. I think many of us in this meeting can say that we get a lot of energy and a lot of meaning and purpose from those interactions with students. That's why we went into this work. And so we all miss that, and we all look forward to returning. I will say, and we'll send out another announcement about this, but on Monday afternoon at 4:30, we are scheduling a moment of remembrance, and that we would like to invite everyone, the entire Mary Washington community, to be a part of. As I said, we'll send out more announcements on this, but we are planning this for 4:30 on Monday, March 15th. And so at the end of your workday, it will not be a long occasion, but I think it is important for us to come together as a community to grieve what we've lost over the last year. To reflect on that, but also to come together in a spirit of hope that what we're looking forward to as we get on the other side of this pandemic. And as I said in my message, and I'll say it again, I'm so proud of this community and how each and every one of you have responded to this challenge. And we've made it this far because of that. And so I'm deeply appreciative of it. I will stop talking though, because I think it's important to get to your questions. That's why we've scheduled this time with you. So without any further ado, Jeff, I think we'll get started and start taking the questions.
Absolutely, President Pino. So the first question at the top of the list is, the staff is very interested in the future of telework at UMW after the pandemic, and it seems like there's very little discussion of what will happen. Everyone realizes UMW will never be an online university, but it would be helpful to start discussions about what is possible with telework now that UMW has proven the concept that many, many departments can telework at least part of the time.
Yes. As I said in my email, we're going to put together some work groups, but this is going to be the first one I put together because there is some sense of urgency around this question about what does the future of work look like at Mary Washington, and knowing that our experience of the last 12 months has taught us that we might be able to have some opportunities for greater flexibility as it relates to telework. And so my hope is that in the course of the next week, we can put that work group together, get it started to go work for the rest of the spring, and come back with some recommendations on how we might be able to change some of our policies to adapt to this new reality and some of the things that we've learned through the pandemic. Beth, I don't know, you might want to, I'm sure you will be a part of that work as well. I don't know if there's anything else you would like to add from the perspective of human resources.
Well, no, I think the point is spot on, that we've learned a lot through the pandemic about what is possible and what we can do, and now it's a matter of moving forward and looking ahead past the pandemic. We're still in a pandemic, so we have to keep a lot of things in place right now, but past the pandemic, and assess and hear from all areas of the university. I think that's very important. We have a pretty complex organizational structure with lots of different types of jobs and functions. So there's going to be a lot of discussion that's going to be needed and input from all those areas to figure out the best ways to move forward. And that's part of the point, is that it will be a moving forward. It won't be going back to normal, because I don't know that anywhere in the country will be ever back to a normal. We'll be going forward to a new normal, and hopefully a better normal. So more to come.
Yeah, so we'll get that started ASAP, and I will, part of that will be reaching out to our governing bodies to get representatives. USC will be involved in those discussions, knowing that many members of the staff council are very interested in this question, and so they will be a part of it, and we'll get working on it ASAP, I promise.
All right, so the next question is from Suzanne Sumner. How different do you expect the fall 2021 semester to be with COVID-19 restrictions? Will we be wearing masks, etc.?
Well, I'm gonna, we have Tim and Jeff have become our COVID experts on all things COVID, and certainly the protocols related to it. So I will start, but then I'll pass it to you, Jeff and Tim, and see what you might want to add. I mean, as I said earlier, I expect that we will still be doing some behavior modification, including mask wearing, at least to some degree. I would imagine, I guess, that there would be still indoor gathering spaces where we'd want to be wearing masks, maybe not outdoors, but indoors. So I think everything that I've been reading and hearing from our public health experts and our epidemiologists is that we can expect at least some measure of mask wearing into the fall. Would you agree, Tim and Jeff?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't see, I think one of the big questions is how widespread vaccine, not just delivery and availability will be, but also how many people actually take it, and then whether or not the variants are an issue. But I'm pretty optimistic. I don't know if anybody saw the guidance that CDC put out yesterday related to vaccinated people. That's the closest thing I've seen to an optimistic press release from the CDC in at least 15 months, maybe ever, but at least 15 months, as I've been reading them closely. So I think that there's a real opportunity for something that comes back to a lot closer to normal. It's why we're at the moment planning for no social distancing in our classrooms. But I think masks are likely to continue to be with us for a while. But I do think as we see more and more people get vaccinated, we'll continue to refine and improve our opportunities to gather in a variety of ways. Tim, I don't know if you want to add anything else.
The only thing that I'll add here is that we're all going to be following the science. We're only 3 months into the first vaccination. And if you look at the sort of outward limit of how long a vaccination is good for, right now, the answer is about 3 months. And so there will be a lot of data collected over the next couple of months. And I think by the time we get to late April, we'll have a much better sense of what the fall looks like, not just for us, but for everyone, not just around the country, but around the world.
All right, looks like the next question is concerning the 5% salary increase. And it's a question about whether or not it will be across the board to all classifications of employee. And the answer is yes, we've committed to that, even though the bill allowed us to make some exceptions to that. We feel that everyone equally deserves that 5% increase. So the answer is yes to that question. All will receive the 5% pay increase, assuming the governor signs the budget, which he has until the end of this month to do so, or to introduce any amendments. And then the General Assembly has about a week or so to respond to any of those amendments. We don't expect any veto of it. And I haven't heard any word, and I don't expect him to do anything as it relates, make any changes as it relates to that 5% salary increase. But I just want to throw that caveat just in case.
Okay. Looks like the next question, from Sarah Appleby, does UMW plan to comply with the state's minimum wage increase that goes into effect on May 1st. It would be helpful to know this as different departments look to hire student employees for the fall.
Yeah, Sarah, it's a great question, and it's the bill has got some kind of vague, odd language to it that we're trying to get clarification. Paul, maybe you might want to chime in here just to explain what we're trying to get an answer on before we fully can answer Sarah's question.
Sure. The bill for the minimum wage has a long list of exceptions. And one of those exceptions is students enrolled in a bona fide educational program. Now, talking to the folks in Richmond and other leaders around the state, no one seems to have a good definition of exactly what that means and what that exemption is intended to cover. So that is being discussed and talked about at the state level. And if it turns out that we are in fact required to pay our students the new minimum wage, we will do so. How exactly we manage that is yet to be seen, but we will comply to the law if it applies to us. So stay tuned.
Thank you, Paul. All right, what's the next question, Jeff?
Sure, it's going along with the question about staff reductions. What is the best way to manage expectations of administration, of faculty and staff, of students, of families, when we're making the promise that things will be better than before in the fall when we have less staff to make all those things happen?
We recognize that there have had to be some very tough decisions as it relates to staffing positions, both hiring freeze and some staff reductions in areas in order to make the fiscal year 21 budget, the budget that we're currently in, work with all the shortfall in enrollment and occupancy. And we were fortunate to escape without the state budget cuts we were planning for, but still we lost some revenue in some areas that we weren't anticipating, like not having on campus for 5 weeks in the fall and having to give refunds for that certainly hurt our bottom line. So yeah, we know that there are areas that are certainly the staffing is down. And I do think that we have to set some priorities, particularly around some of the areas that directly serve students, where we know we're going to have to serve them and maybe even invest more than we have before. And so we're still in the early phases of putting the budget together. And I don't want to build expectations about being able to restore all positions, because we know that is unlikely given the current state of affairs as it relates to the enrollment picture and our occupancy picture in the residence hall. But I am somewhat hopeful that we'll be able to restore some of that staffing. So it's a big question. I think it's one of those questions that I would like to probably dig down into more of the specifics, and maybe there is an opportunity for the person who asked that question to reach out to me sort of more directly to give me a specific idea of what areas are short-staffed that might affect the student experience, so that we can have a conversation about what we might be able to do in that area.
And I'm going along with that. I'm seriously concerned about my unit's ability to return to anything like normal given the staff reductions we have experienced. We cannot resume our pre-COVID services at this staff level. Will students and faculty expect normal services of units that have experienced steep staff cuts?
Yeah, again, I don't know the specifics of the question in terms of where it's coming from. And so I'd have to rely on certainly the conversations I have with my cabinet members as we talk about the budget and what areas have been hit harder than others and which ones need to have priority in terms of when we can start authorizing searches in certain areas where we need to do that sooner than later to make sure that we have adequate services. So I don't know the specific area that you're referencing, but I have no doubt that the vice presidents do, and that those will be presented through as we go through the budgeting process. Again, but happy to take more sort of offline, some specific questions in areas, and maybe it might make sense, VPs, for me to have a follow-up meeting in areas, maybe in your specific areas. If you have a staff meeting or an opportunity for me to engage people directly in their areas where they have the greater concern, I'm happy to do that. I'm also happy to go to any USC meeting or any other meeting that where staff might be present, that I can engage people directly in their areas where they have concerns.
Okay, so the next question is from Jennifer Walker. Is there a plan in place or discussion starting about how to increase support for students academically and from a mental health perspective in the next few years? It would not be surprising to see an uptick in these concerns with students.
Yeah, well, I know, I might let Nina and Tim talk a bit on the academic side in terms of the conversations they're having around academic support. And Juliet, I might ask you to weigh in as it relates to the wellness and mental health piece that Jennifer raises. And Jennifer, first of all, I want to say thank you for all your leadership around wellness this past year. And so maybe the three of you could help answer that question.
Let me jump in quickly and then I'll hand it off to Tim and then he can hand it off to Juliet. Yeah, Jennifer, thank you for the question. And just to echo what Troy said, thank you for all the work you're doing on this. Yeah, I think we're looking at a number of things. I think we need to look at some of our deadlines. We probably need to be working more with financial aid and enrollment management to see if we can maybe move some of those deadlines around, because that does take pressure off students if they can make decisions about pass, fail, and other kinds of changes in their courses, maybe a little bit later into the semester. Remember that a lot of that is a function of things like academic standing on the financial aid side. So I think we're looking at some flexibility there. I think we're looking at educating our students better about the options and the flexibility they do have. And I do know that there is a strong effort to continue to support faculty and our academic advising staff in supporting students. But you are right. This is going to be a 2 to 3 year group that will have to be supported, and their needs are going to be very different. I also think our faculty have started, and we probably need to do a lot more focused work on that. And that is thinking about a lot of these cognitive and sort of learning issues that are taking place under COVID. And while I think our faculty have done a marvelous job trying to adapt their pedagogies and their course designs and a variety of other things to take into account the fact that our students have had to work a lot harder and struggle through remote instruction, I actually think some of their struggles are going to continue even when we go face to face. So yes, I think this is going to be a 2 to 3 year process. And I think it's going to involve not just academic services, but the faculty, student affairs, everybody. Tim, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Sure. So I will contradict the opening piece of this meeting where we cheered that 90% of our classes were going to be face-to-face. Of course, that's true. We are primarily a residential campus, and we need to return to such. However, there are some questions about maybe students over the course of the past year have really adapted quite well to an online learning environment, or they will expect more of that. And so I think there's a lot that we're going to learn as students do come back to campus and share their experiences, and they share the expectations that they have for their academic experience going forward. Two other things which I think matter here. The first is that we had a student success plan that did envision pre-pandemic a lot of the areas in which student support, student academic support could be improved in order to enhance student success. I think we need to revisit that in light of what we've learned over the past 12 months and what our expectations are going forward. I think that will be critically important. The other thing that I'll say is that we do have an opportunity as part of our reaffirmation of accreditation for the Southern Association, and that is simply to say that we will be looking in depth and needing to justify the adequacy of all of our student support services. And so we'll be looking at those with fresh eyes as Nicole Crowder moves through with our various offices and starts to make that case. And so I think there will be an opportunity to just learn from some of the recent data what the student experience has been like, what the expectations are. Next year will definitely be a year of adaptation as we bend old practices and old offices to new realities.
Juliet, is there anything you'd like to add as it relates to student?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Jennifer, for your leadership and for all the people on campus who've been looking at mental health and wellness this year. In particular, I think one of the things, there's been so much planning. In fact, there have been a lot of groups that have been looking at mental health and wellness out of, in some ways, necessity because of what we've seen with this pandemic. And I think one of the outcomes of the pandemic that's a little bit of a silver lining is the recognition that mental health and wellness, we have to understand it comprehensively. It's not just about looking at students, supporting students, it's faculty, staff, and how can we bring parents into the conversation. On Thursday, we're having a session with parents on supporting students in the time of COVID, for instance. And I think that that's going to be very helpful for us as well as the parents. So in terms of the question about planning, yes, there's the ad hoc mental health and wellness group that Jennifer chairs that came out of the pandemic. And because they saw the great needs on campus continue to meet throughout the year, there's the President's Council on Wellness, and there's the JED Strategic Planning group that is a big, massive interdisciplinary group. We're finalizing that strategic plan. Actually, I talked to Dr. Pano about it earlier today. And I think what we're going to do is try to take the other planning efforts from those other groups, look at some of the analyses that came out of things like the analysis of the May 31st protests and recommendations around mental health crisis after hours, try to bring all of that planning and all that information together into something strategic that helps us better understand how to meet not just the needs of our students, but our entire community.
Thank you all. Okay. Well, yes, happy birthday, Jeff. I think that we all recognize that this is really just a cover for a birthday party, for a virtual birthday party.
Oh, it's the birthday I always dreamed of.
I'm sure. No doubt. So the next question is about concerning travel, and I will probably let Jeff and Tim weigh in on this. I did note that in that relatively optimistic CDC announcement yesterday that they still did caution against travel, even for those who've been vaccinated. So we're still in a holding pattern, but I think this is more about sort of forward looking, maybe into the fall. This is maybe what the question has in mind. Jeff, Tim, what are your thoughts?
Sure, Tim, do you want to take a stab at this one first?
Well, I think the president covered it. I think it's too soon to tell how we'll be able to loosen travel restrictions. I mean, the CDC guidance, and I heard a lot of discussion of it last night, it is clear that they felt that they needed to make that statement yesterday. At the same time, Director Walensky also said, we do realize we're going to need to revisit that. And so my suggestion is that we'll be watching very carefully and revisiting it along with the CDC. And I would expect that when they do that, they will have very clear and specific guidance on what travel will and should look like. And my suspicion is that there will be some changes to the way we understand travel.
Thank you. Steve has a question about digital teaching. And I think that the question really comes down to what options will faculty have to apply to teach entire courses or parts of courses in the future via the new digital tools they've learned over the course of this year. I think that is an excellent question. We have some good people here that I think can add their thoughts to this. I know Nina, Tim, and Jeff, you all might have some thoughts on this topic.
Absolutely. I mean, the goal here is that everything that you've learned and everything that is stimulating you and your students and that you think is productive, you should keep doing. And while we did say 90% of our classes next year right now are scheduled to be, the full regular classes are scheduled to be face-to-face, we know that faculty are also going to be experimenting with those. We know some of them will probably end up being more hybrid and flex. We also know that you have things that you want to do in certain modalities and other things that you want to do in other modalities. So Steve, I just celebrate that comment, and I tell you, just continue to innovate and be creative and meet the needs of your students. And absolutely use all the tools that you think are effective and that you believe that you and the students are benefiting from. Jeff, Tim?
I'll just say that, I I joked about the 90%, and in part that's a joke, and in part that's reality. We absolutely need to signal that we have a full and robust return to campus, and that's what that does when students receive the course schedule next Monday, in fact. But we are going to need to have some very serious, deliberate conversations about how we don't let the muscles that we've built up over the past 12 months atrophy, because they can and they will. And I know that just in my own life, when I stop using certain things, that I lose that ability and lose that skill. And so I think that's a very important conversation that needs to be engaged immediately with the fall, and needs to be part of the conversation we have with our students about what their expectations are.
Jeff, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I mean, I guess a couple of things. One is just, I'm trying very hard not to give my longtime colleague, Dr. Harris, a hard time about this, because I've been telling him this for a long time, but I'm glad it just took a pandemic for him to realize. So, but no, I mean, just all joking aside, I mean, I think that there are lots of opportunities here, and I think part of what we've seen is that face-to-face, hybrid, entirely asynchronous, synchronous. We understand there are many shades and gradations within that, and I think we have to figure out what makes sense in our own teaching, and we have to figure out what makes sense in terms of our students' needs, and that's going to vary from class to class, from major to major, from faculty member to faculty member. But we do have an incredibly supportive team in DLS and the Center for Teaching that's ready to help people brainstorm what that looks like.
Actually, Jeff, I think Steve just asked that question as a birthday present to you. He wanted to give you that moment. So he kind of threw that your way. So thank you, Steve, for doing that. We set that up well before the meeting. Okay, Dan has a question, and it is about a projected decline in freshman enrollment for this fall. Does that look like a short-term deal that is COVID related, or are we seeing this as a trend that we can expect for the foreseeable future? How will we adjust for this lost revenue? Well, this is certainly, Kimberly, you might want to chime in on this. I think in part it is, it's probably too early to tell whether or not this is a 1 year aberration or 2 year, if you count this year that we're in as also an aberration of our traditional enrollment patterns, or whether or not this is going to be a new normal. And a lot of it depends on whether or not some of the shifts in the marketplace that's determined not only by us, but by other institutions are permanent in nature. And we were already anticipating a bit of a decline as the decade progressed because of the demographic changes. And so we expected that more to be around mid-decade as opposed to early decade. So this is kind of an acceleration of this. So it's a great question, Dan. It's a little early to probably tell whether or not this is going to be a short-term setback or something that's more permanent. Before I answer the second part of your question, I'm going to let Kimberly weigh in and see what her thoughts are.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think it's, in addition to the decline, the birth rate drop. And so we know we're anticipating having smaller pools just based on, as President Panel said, the demographics. And in addition, there have been fewer international students over the last 3 years. There have been 3 years in a row, a consecutive drop. And so although we don't enroll a large number of international students, our peers do. And so certainly there's a ripple effect that happens in that sense. And so with fewer international students, obviously there's going to be more domestic students that are going to be tapped. And so there are a lot of things that are really that we're tracking. But for us, it is a little too early to tell. We certainly have been trying to anticipate and trying to plan and really control the things that we can. But certainly we're watching the macro trends that will have an impact.
Yeah, in terms of the second part of your question, adjusting for lost revenue, certainly, revenue, as I mentioned in my email, over 70% of our revenue comes from tuition and fees. And so even though we did relatively well through this legislative session on the state side, I think Dan's question gets to really the heart of our challenge, is that that revenue on the tuition and fee side is critically important to sort of our sustenance and our ability to support, the earlier questions about staffing, to be able to restore and invest in some of those services that our students need. It's a vicious cycle for sure. I think we're going to have to continue to think about, how do we maximize that tuition and fee revenue? And we're going to have to think, we're probably going to have to step back. And Paul will tell you that we've been working pretty hard the last couple of years on restructuring our budget and taking a look at some of those fixed costs, especially around debt service, and how to better manage that, and how to create a budgeting that is more of sort of in alignment with the revenue streams to the fixed costs that we have to cover each year. We have revenue streams that include housing, meal plans, auxiliary fee, tuition, and then state support. They all go to different things, to different buckets. And how do we manage and maximize those revenue streams, and then invest in the things that are going to help us be successful in this incredibly competitive market? I think that's where we really need to start our focus around these working groups in terms of our strategic planning. What programs are we going to have to invest in? Just as an aside, I'm part of a statewide with some other presidents and some leaders in business, a working group that collaborates to think about where higher education in Virginia needs to be and where we need to be investing around things like affordability and access, but also around talent development in the Commonwealth, and how do we keep talent here in the Commonwealth. And as a part of that work, we've engaged firms that have done a lot of polling for us, and I received some preliminary polling results, and these polls are used with gubernatorial candidates, and we're in an election year here in Virginia, and so they use this to go and talk to what will ultimately be the candidates from the Democratic and the Republican parties, to show them what the electorate is feeling about higher education. And I can tell you, we know that affordability is a huge issue facing families right now. As a liberal arts institution, it pains me, I have to say, that the increased focus on workforce needs, but that is a reality. That is a reality, is that you see the polling, it goes off the charts when asked questions about whether or not people value institutions and higher education in general, and why. And it's usually around it's around careers and employability and degrees that people feel confident will give them the skills to be successful in the marketplace. And the more that we can collaborate with business and employers around experiential learning to give them those skills and to set themselves up for jobs after they graduate are critically important. And I understand why, even though as a liberal arts guy, I would like our focus to be on intrinsic value of learning and lifelong learning and all of that. I recognize, especially when you talk to parents and students and they're investing, in some cases, over $100,000 for their student to attend Mary Washington, even in-state students. I talked to a father just yesterday whose student is graduating this year, saying, hey, we've invested $100,000 in this education. Out-of-state students, in some cases, they're investing as much as $150,000 in their college education to come to here at Mary Washington. And so when you're investing that kind of money, and if you're a family from middle class or working class, this is a huge challenge and a huge sacrifice to attend. So I get it. I understand why. So I think we're going to have to think as an institution about how we position ourselves as a liberal arts institution, but that is also making sure that these students who are coming here understand that they are going to be employable, that they are going to be career ready. And even in those liberal arts majors, there's a lot of conversations. I'm a humanities guy. That's my background. That's something I value and I think is critically important. How do we think about these majors in terms of how we market and talk about them to prospective students? How do we think about those sort of stackable skills, those certifications that might complement or supplement someone who graduates with a degree in history or English or art history? How do we think about what we're doing and the kind of education we're offering here at Mary Washington that will resonate? Because I can tell you that the polling numbers, when you saw how people reacted and their opinion changed about higher education and whether or not the investment was worth it, how it changed when the question started focusing on, hey, if a college did this, would you consider it to be a more valuable? I mean, it went off the charts when you could make the case that an education from your institution was leading to some predictable employment on the back end. And so that's something as a liberal arts institution, I think we're going to have to focus on, because the bottom line, Dan, I think to your question is, we're going to have to be marketable. We're doing the branding and we're talking about what we think we do well, but we have to connect with what the needs are with the students we're trying to educate, and we're trying to convince that Mary Washington is the place for them. So that's my thought. I think we're going to have to manage this around some smart budgeting. It's a big question, and I'd be happy, Dan, to go to talk to you personally or to others in the College of Business or anyone about some of the inside baseball work that we're doing to try and make the operations more sustainable for the long term, not just the short term. Kimberly, I see your hands raised.
Yes, thank you, President Pano. I think the other thing I would add, or just kind of to Tim's point earlier, our student success plan. At the end of each year, we always have an opportunity to re-enroll our students. And so some, modest increases on the retention side really will help us as we move through these next few years. And so when we've recognized that, that's certainly been a critical part of our plan. And so I agree with Tim's earlier point that this is a great opportunity to revisit that, because again, some increases on the retention side will also go very far.
Okay, next one's from Angela Pitts. Has UMW begun considering what kinds of additional academic supports incoming students, the 2021 fall class, will need given the effects of remote high school education?
Yeah, it's a big one. We're going to have some students arrive on campus in August who are going to have some challenges because of the last, it'll have been for them probably a year and a half that their educations were disrupted. So I know Tim, Nina, and any others who've been focused and thinking about this, maybe you might want to try to answer Angela's question.
Sure, happy to jump in. The answer is yes, but not nearly enough. And I think for the reasons that the president just outlined. We have an opportunity, I think, this summer. I was just finishing up with April Wynn and Wes Hilliard to talk about the academic advising portion of orientation. And they've really mapped out a plan for this summer that looks very much like last summer, in which students really would have one-on-one opportunities to connect with a faculty advisor for a really substantive meeting. It was really well received by the students, their parents, but also by the faculty that worked so hard last summer. We're going to repeat that, and I think we need to be listening a little bit differently. And from that sampling, census level sampling of all of our students, I think we'll be able to identify a little bit more carefully some of those crucial gaps that we may not be able to create additional academic resources to support students, but we might bend or we might change some of the supports that we have based upon what we're hearing from students over the course of the summer. And then, of course, we'll build that right into the first year experience. So stay tuned.
Thank you. Kim has I think a clear point that certainly begs a question, right? The point that the mental health resources are already overwhelmed, and based on conversations with students, there's a desperate need for those counseling services. And they need to be immediate, they need to be fast, they need to be professional. And so I know that this is an ongoing challenge that we try to address, but I can tell you that there's probably no way we'll ever be able to have enough counselors to meet those immediate needs that we're seeing, not just because of the pandemic, but even before the pandemic, even though we have tried to invest. Juliet, this might be an opportunity for you to talk a little bit more, because I really do think the concept, the future is around wellness and a more holistic approach. And I know this is why we've partnered with JED around this strategic planning. And we referenced Jennifer and her leadership of that group, that the focus needs to be more proactive and holistic. And we can't merely rely on the counseling center to address these mental health concerns.
Yeah, you hit it right on the head, Dr. Pano. It is the concept of wellness, the many different dimensions of wellness. including physical activity and financial wellness, and the importance of a sense of belonging and connection with one another and other human beings, how much that's such an important part of the mission that we have at the university. I will say another thing that has become clear for us this year is that telecounseling is something that works with many of our students. And that's something that we are going to step up with this from this point forward. And hopefully that will help address some of the immediacy. We know students are often in crisis after hours. So the focus on the after hours mental health support as well. But yes, wellness, we are, there's just, it's interdisciplinary. It's across the university, like I was saying earlier. The JED Foundation, with whom we're partnering and have this wonderful 4-year partnership, is nationally renowned for the work that they do. And they figure out ways to see what's really organic to your institution and to lift that up and understand the proactive approach to wellness. But specifically speaking, I would say things around telecounseling will really help as well.
Thank you, Juliet. See, Suzanne has a question about the 1C classification and when they will be eligible for vaccines. I can tell you before I pass this off to Jeff, because I know he will have a much fuller answer because he's been on the front lines of this fight, that we've been incredibly frustrated that we haven't been able to get our faculty and staff, particularly those of you who are on the front lines in the case of faculty who are teaching in-person classes, that we're not able to get you further up in the queue. I personally think that you should already be eligible for those vaccines, but maybe Jeff, you could provide a little more insight into those conversations and when they might be able to anticipate their eligibility.
Yeah, Suzanne, it's a great question. It keeps me up at night, frankly, quite a bit. So we've been asking this question, and the COVID directors at all the institutions have been asking this question from the very beginning. We were frustrated that institutions of higher ed were placed in 1C in the first place. But honestly, we've been having trouble just even getting our 1A and 1B people to the point of accessing vaccines. We have made some progress on that in recent weeks, and that's been good. Just the other day, Tim and I were trying to make the case to the local health district that faculty who teach in person could fit one of the other categories, and we've made this for a number of people who are involved in frontline activities. And some we've been successful. Residence Life, for example, finally, after several months of making the argument that our Residence Life staff were really frontline and involved in many cases almost in a first responder situation to students in distress, that finally within the last week the local health district agreed, but they haven't agreed in other health districts, we found out, right? So part of the problem is just that each health district is making its own calls on these things. But what you specifically asked was, do we know when vaccines for Tier C will occur? And the short answer is no. What we have is a number of impressions from other health districts. Our health district will not commit to this. They have not said. I will tell you, Tim and I heard earlier today that other health districts have been hearing late March, as early as late March, they might get to 1C. But other health districts said that they had heard that late April was when they thought that their districts would get to 1C. I think it is also going to be one of those things. It will depend on the particular district. It will depend on how many people in 1B are actually going and getting their vaccine, how much of an effort the local health district wants to push on those 1B to make sure that they have access and that they provide that. And then it's all of this depends on a vaccine supply. And the good news in that area is that the numbers of available vaccines are significantly increasing, and so that's good news. But I will echo President Peno's description of frustration. It has been incredibly difficult, and I know, and being involved in the conversations, I can only imagine how frustrating it is to not be involved in those conversations and just be waiting. Certainly, if there are any health conditions or age, get yourself registered. But regardless, you should register at vaccinate.virginia.gov. I do not entirely understand, and by that I mean I don't have any idea how they're actually pulling people off of that list. When you ask some members of VDH, they can't even tell you how they're pulling people off the list in a consistent basis. But if you're not in the, if you're in the system, then there's a chance, then there's a greater chance that you get pulled than if you're not in the system. So please do get registered, and we will continue to fight and push and make the argument. I made this case in a meeting with the Secretary of Education, the 2 Deputy Secretaries of Education, the Chief Epidemiologist of EDH, and the Deputy Secretary of Commerce and Trade just last week. That it was, you know, we had been back a lot longer than the K-12 schools had been, and that our faculty and staff really deserve to get the vaccine. But some of those arguments have been more effective than others. Tim, I didn't know if you wanted to follow up any.
Yeah, no, I just want to definitely suggest go to Vaccinate Virginia and get yourself in the queue. Two other suggestions: check your junk mail, check your unfocused folder, but also you might want to consider also taking phone calls from 540 numbers that you might normally disregard, or at least listen to your voicemail and perhaps even set your voicemail up so that they can leave messages, and be ready to go at a moment's notice. That's the other thing that we've learned is that you can get a call on a Sunday night and they'll say, we have a spot at Wegmans at 9 a.m. Can you be here?
Thanks. Those are, yeah, very important, Tim.
Thank you. The next question I think would be a good one for you, Nina, to take. It's about the flexibility of faculty members who do not feel safe to teach in person, or if they have a particular health complication, depending on conditions of the fall semester, will they have some agency in selecting their modality?
Yeah, the answer is yes. If you, right now, everybody's schedules have already been put in place. And as we know, and as we referred to earlier, students will start getting advising and registering in the next 3 weeks. But if you are concerned now, it would be a good idea to talk to your department chair. If what you're concerned about is things look good now, but we don't know how you're going to feel. You don't know how you're going to feel. You don't know what kind of situation you might be in the fall. Do not hesitate to go to your department chair or your associate dean. Thus far, any faculty member who's had a very particular concern, we have been able to successfully address. So I would say you start with your department chair or your associate dean. And again, I'm very sensitive to the fact that people feel very positive right now, but things could look very different to you in the first week of August for a variety of reasons. And I would say as soon as you think you are not comfortable or you might be putting your health at risk by teaching face-to-face, you need to be talking to your department chair. And if we need to, we can also bring in someone from HR, but you need to be working with your chair or your associate dean. And thus far, I can tell you, we've been able to resolve every issue so far.
Great. Thank you, Nina. I'm going to keep us moving along with the few minutes we have left. I want to try to get to as many questions as we possibly can. What's the next one, Jeff? So it's from Malcolm. So what's next for our sort of our diversity and inclusion work? Sabrina, this is, I think, probably good for you to answer. I think if those of you who haven't heard know that Sabrina is retiring at the end of this year, and this will be a big loss, but she really has helped pave the way in an area that's of critical importance for Mary Washington's future. So why don't you talk a little bit about the planning for the future?
Thanks, Troy, and thanks folks for being here and really focusing in on a very important part of the work that we do. So right now, as we speak, we're in the process of appointing a working group similar to what President Pena was putting in place to explore other very important aspects of our work. This working group is going to be examining different options for what's the best way to move forward with the next iteration of this role. The working group is made up of faculty and staff based on their roles within the university that relate to our DE&I work, diversity, equity, and inclusion work, as well as a representative from the UFC and a representative from the USC. So one of the charges of this group is to look at different models and then to think through what works best for us. What I'm most excited about during this transition, though, is the timely passage of the state legislation for One Virginia. And that's going to bring all higher eds and state institutions into a community of practice around diversity, equity, and inclusion, because it has adopted the model of the American Association of Colleges and Universities, their inclusive excellence framework for strategic planning. And so President Pano had already committed to developing a 5-year strategic plan specifically dedicated to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So this working group is not only going to be suggesting to him and studying options for the next iteration of this role, it's also going to be setting up a permanent structure to help us through this strategic planning. So a lot of good energy is in play right now to keep momentum moving forward. The working group is set to sunset by April 30th. So we're going to be working real hard for the next several weeks. And once we get beyond that period, then I think we'll have recommendations to President Pano for what he wants to do next with this role. So I think that sums it up, Troy, President Pano.
No, you can call me Troy. That's my name. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Malcolm, I think you're going to be invited to work on that work.
Yeah, I know.
So you're going to be working on it.
You're on the list.
You're on the list.
You're on the list.
But really, I do see, Malcolm, your question is, I think it's the next phase of our work. You know, I think the strategic vision that we approved about 4 years ago that put our work on diversity and inclusion as a pillar of our strategic vision and the specific goals under that. And we've made tremendous progress with Sabrina's leadership in this area, but we all recognize that this is evolving and we have a long way to go. And so we need to reiterate what our goal is here in the next phase of our work around diversity and inclusion. So that's where we'll focus our attention here in the coming weeks. Next question. What do we have here, Jeff?
Sure. With potential for a continuation of expanded telework options and a potential for continued hybrid modalities on the academic side going forward, are there any considerations for increasing our IT support staff? IT is grossly understaffed to help support staff, faculty, and students with all the technologies available and issues that arise. While DLS is available, their focus is more on the teaching and learning technologies, are not able to help fill in the gaps from the lack of available staff within IT itself.
Yeah, you know, I agree with the question. You know, I know Jeff makes this point to me that we have a way understaffed IT department. And especially when you think about the future, as one of my mentors said, can you imagine a future with less technology? The answer is probably no. And especially that is true for us here at Mary Washington. So I take the question, you know, I think a lot of the questions that have been asked around staffing, yes, we're going to have to find the resources to make these investments, these strategic investments. Are we going to be able to do everything we want to do? No, unfortunately, given our financial situation right now, that's not the case. But I think IT is an area where we're going to have to make some investments if we're going to be successful in the future. So we will keep this as a top priority moving through the budget cycle.
I didn't plant that question, just to be clear. Okay. Mental health concerns have come up a lot. The biggest thing I've heard from students is how stressed and overworked they are, with their professors and the university not giving them a break. They look at the one day off in the middle of the week tomorrow as borderline offensive when they've been begging for a break. They didn't get that with the grading system, and it seems that a lot of them feel their professors just do not care. How do we support students who feel they aren't being heard by anyone?
Yeah, this is this echoes a very painful conversation I had last, I think it was Thursday late afternoon, if I'm not mistaken, with the SGA executive committee. Those 5 students who were sharing these very concerns and frustrations. And it was painful because they were talking very honestly from their heart about how many students, themselves included, felt Some of these students are sort of ending their Mary Washington experience, and it's not ending the way we would obviously had hoped it would end for them. And many of these students are students, they're on SGA, they're in leadership roles, so they love Mary Washington, right? I mean, the students usually who take these kinds of leadership positions on campus and are involved at this level are people who are engaged, they're students who love the place. So I was talking to students who love Mary Washington, and it was painful to hear their experience and their feeling. And many of their feelings were that Mary Washington has in some ways abandoned them at a time of great need, that they're at their low point during the pandemic, as this is dragged on now for a full year. And whether it's, the lack of a spring break, alternative grading, whatever the issues are, the feeling is that we haven't been responsive. And I know that for a couple weeks, it seems, and what they said, it seems like they just get shot with negative news or disappointing news on a regular basis. It was hard. It was hard to sit there for an hour and listen to this. And these are students who I've worked with pretty closely over the last couple of years. And it was hard for me to hear about a community I love and students who I care so deeply about feel that way about this place and their experience here. I'm looking for ideas on how we can sprinkle a little sunshine and joy into the lives of these students as we go into our last 2 months of the academic year. I want to do it with great sensitivity to our faculty and the classes that they teach and the plans that they have for the rest of the semester. And so I'm not exactly sure what the answer is as I sit here and talk to you today, but I will tell you that I am looking for ideas and for ways that we as a community can come together and show these students not only that we're empathetic, but that we're taking some action to try and help and give them some relief during this time of great stress. So I think following this meeting, there have been a lot of great questions. Some of them are very specific. Some of them I needed a little more context to probably be able to fully answer. And so I'm going to reiterate what I've offered before, and is if there's an opportunity, and we can do it virtually, obviously. And so if there's an opportunity for me to meet with groups who might have some specific questions, concerns, or ideas on what we can do to better support our students during this very stressful time, because I know the care that each and every one of you take in your work, whether you're a faculty member or a staff member, and that this is a place, I've worked at multiple institutions, multiple universities. This is a place that is more student-centric than any I've worked at and cares about the students and put their needs first and foremost. And so I know that as a community, all of our decisions, we have tried to be student-centric and keep the safety and welfare of those students in the forefront of our mind as we make these difficult decisions. So if there are things that we can do as a community, if there are things I can do as a president to be helpful, I would be interested in engaging you in a conversation to get some better ideas on what we might be able to do. It's 5:03. I am happy to take one more question and then probably need to wrap it up there, Jeff, I think.
Can you address changes to reporting structures or units that will come with Tim's changed position?
Well, I can't, but I'm hoping there are other people here who can. Tim, Nina, you've been working on this. Maybe Tim, you might want to start.
Sure. Well, first of all, we have a provost until July 1st, and she is absolutely exceptional and will continue to lead. And I will do my best to support her in every step of the way over the next 3.5 months. We've begun some of these conversations, but this interim provost announcement is, I think, less than 2 weeks old or just around 2 weeks old. And so many of those conversations are not yet started and will continue to go on over the next couple of months. But I welcome input, ideas, suggestions, because we will be doing more with less over the next 2 years.
Anything you'd like to add, Nina?
Just, I know it's hard to not have answers, and this is a change. So yeah, just if you have any specific questions or concerns, you can absolutely address them to me or to Tim. but we are still working out the details, and it should be, we'll have clarity and be able to give you details probably in the next month.
All right, thank you. Just real quick, there's a question. There's a question. If we can get to it before we sign off, I know the 4 people who have liked the question would really appreciate it. It's a question about sabbaticals and faculty research. When could they expect those to be restored?
Well, we're working on on anything that we can fund, but I do not think we're going to be able to fund sabbaticals next year. So I think right now the way the budget is looking, as you know, if you're faculty, you know that we are moving forward on the Waples and we're moving forward on the Jepsons, and those faculty are already aware of that. And we are working on ways to provide additional research support. I just had a conversation with Keith Mallinger a couple days ago about trying to restore some research funding in arts and sciences. So we're working on it, but unfortunately, I don't think we're going to be able to fund sabbaticals for next year. Okay, well, on that disappointing note, I think that we've extended beyond our time limit, and I know people have many other things to do and families to get to. So again, I want to thank you for joining us. I don't see this as the end of the conversation. Again, I'm extending the offer. If there are areas that would like to invite me to have a conversation with your area, I'm open to that. And maybe I can do a better job of answering some of the specific questions you have about staffing. With that, I am going to again remind everyone of our moment of remembrance, 4:30 next Monday. Is there any other announcement, team, that I should make before we let everyone go? Or are we good? All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Hope you're all doing well and look forward to the next time. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.